An apparition of an older woman clothed in Victorian dress, and a graveyard in the Pacific watched over by a beacon in the night. These are just two of the haunted lighthouses in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to Spooky Tales of the Pacific Northwest and beyond.
Hello, my name is Jennifer, and this is Spooky Tales of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Today we are going to be talking about two haunted lighthouses that are located on the West Coast. One of them is located in Oregon, and one is located in Washington. So our first lighthouse is called Heceta Lighthouse, and it is located on the coast of Oregon. And it is located near the town of Florence. It was built in the 1800s and was turned on in 1894. It's considered one of the brightest lighthouses on Oregon's coast with a candle power of 1.2 million. I think I read somewhere that it is like the second brightest lighthouse in the country, but I am unsure, and I will have to look into that a little bit more because I don't like to be unsure. This lighthouse was named after an explorer named Bruno Heceta, who sailed up the Mexican coast in 1775. He actually identified the headland of this area in his writings, and so this lighthouse was named after him. The lighthouse was built with the same architectural plans as Umpqua River Light to save on night, which apparently everybody did, and every single generation was try to do as much as they could to save money. The first order lens that it had in it was from England, and I think the Umpqua River was from somewhere in the United States. Many keepers and their families lived at the light station until around 1963, when Ossie Atlick, the very last lighthouse keeper, turned off the lights. Ossie passed away a year after his retirement from a heart attack while he was trying to help somebody who had gone into the ditch. In 1996, the lighthouse was restored and turned into a 3-bedroom Airbnb, and it's also open for tours. I think it would be really interesting to go and tour it. Maybe not necessarily stay, because I have a weird thing about Airbnbs, but definitely to tour the lighthouse. The lighthouse also served as a military barracks during World War II, and it was a satellite campus for the Lane Community College, which is located in Eugene, Oregon. And it was the satellite campus from 1970 to 1995. The keepers' houses were placed on the National Registry of Historic Places in 1973. And I say keepers' houses because there was more than just one keeper. There was the head keeper and then assistants. I think this particular lighthouse had 2 or 3 assistants. I can't remember, so I'll have to definitely look into that again. On October 30th, between the hours of 11:30 p.m. and 2:30 a.m., the witching hours, Heceta Lighthouse Station is open for ghostly tours. You are able to experience all of the history that is involved with Heceta Lighthouse, which is immense, and you would also be able to listen to some ghost stories. One of those stories just happens to be that of the resident ghost, and who they have named Rue. So their story for Rue goes that in the 1890s, there was a wife of one of the assistant lighthouse keepers had a young child who may have passed away while they were stationed at the lighthouse. This particular story tells that this woman had 2 children who one of which drowned and one who survived. The child who drowned, it's not really known whether or not the child drowned in the rain cistern or in the ocean. They did find an unmarked and undisturbed grave on the hillside above the lighthouse, so maybe this is that particular child's grave. The story also goes that this woman left after they were stationed at the lighthouse, and when she passed away, where she was living for the rest of her life, she actually returned in spirit to Heceta Lighthouse to search for her lost child. They say that she got the name Rue because during the time that the station was the satellite campus for the community college, some of the students were playing with a Ouija board, and the planchette spelled out R-U-E, or Rue. So they started calling the spirit Rue. They don't know, and they didn't know at the time, is whether or not the name that the planchette spelled out was that of the woman or that of the child. They can't really confirm this because apparently lighthouse keepers, their families were not listed on any of the registries, just the keepers. So no matter how much information they find, they might not ever be able to find that information. So it's kind of unconfirmed. But they do say that Rue is a rather active spirit. They have had many unexplained things and different encounters reported through the lighthouse and the keepers' houses since I think what I've found, it said the 1930s. It might have been the 50s too, but I'll have to relook and see and check. But I think it was the 1930s. So, but one of the things that had been found that was rather unexplained during this time was a stocking from the 1890s was found in place of rat poison. So if you don't know what a stocking is, back in those days, women didn't have pantyhose or anything like that. So they usually wore silk stockings in place of pantyhose. And so that was what was found in the place of the rat poison. They also say that a worker was cleaning glass up in the attic, and he actually found himself face to face in that glass with a reflection of an older woman in Victorian dress with long silver hair. I don't know if her hair was long, but she was wearing a long, dark Victorian style dress, and she had silver hair. I guess this particular worker also broke an attic window, but because he was scared of the face he saw in the window, he didn't clean up the mess. And the people who were living there said that they could hear sounds coming from the attic at night. And when they went to go investigate it the next morning, they found that the glass from the broken window had been swept into a neat pile. I wish I had somebody who would sweep things into a neat pile for me. I don't, unfortunately. They even had a report of fire alarms going off while workers were painting, which makes sense if anybody has ever really done any big research with, or even watched those silly shows like Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and stuff like that. They do say that during times of renovation in a home that's suspected to be haunted, that the activity level does increase. So anyway, this one, everybody made sure that there was no fires going. The fire alarms were going off. There was no fires. And when everybody went to bed, the fire alarms actually continued to go off, and they were forced to remove the batteries. But apparently, even removing the batteries didn't make any difference, and they continued to go off throughout the night. There is a room in the keeper's residence that is called the Victoria room, and that is what is said to be haunted the most by Miss Rue. And so, the pictures of Heceta Head are pretty breathtaking, and they're just quite beautiful, and definitely worth a visit. And if you do go, go during Halloween, and you can go during at night and have that ghostly tour. I think that would be pretty fun. Or go during the daylight hours and take lots of pictures. So our next lighthouse is the North Head Lighthouse, which is located on the Long Beach Peninsula. And this is where the Columbia meets the Pacific Ocean. This lighthouse can be seen at the base of the peninsula, where it was built to help decrease the risk of sinking on the Columbia River sandbar. And the Columbia River sandbar in the mouth of the Columbia is probably one of the most treacherous places that you could ever encounter on the ocean, on the West Coast in particular. This area has been aptly named the Graveyard of the Pacific, and the sandbar itself has claimed more than 2,000 shipping vessels and 700, if not more than 700 lives since 1792. There is the North Head Lighthouse and the Cape Disappointment Lighthouse, excuse me, were both constructed in the mid to late 1800s. And the Cape Disappointment Lighthouse did help reduce shipwrecks in this area, but it did not reduce the risk of wreck coming from the north. And they really were struggling with that. So this is the reason why the North Head Lighthouse was built. Both these lighthouses are still operational today, and they are under the jurisdiction of the United States Coast Guard and are maintained by the Washington State Parks. Like I said, the North Head was constructed after Cape Disappointment because they actually had an increase of wrecks coming from the north. So that would be, like northern Washington and Canada and Alaska and those areas. And that is because the other lighthouse, Cape Disappointment, couldn't be seen from the northern direction. So, they built the North Head. Get it? North Head. So that it would help reduce the wrecks coming from the north. And it apparently did. So this lighthouse was constructed, like I said, in the late 1800s. I think what I read was 1893, I want to say. And it was manned. The lighthouse keeper's residence was located slightly a little inland from the light, and it's been home to many lighthouse keepers and their families. There was the first lighthouse keeper. Sorry, my notes are a little backwards. The first lighthouse keepers was named Alexander K. I want to say it's Pisanen, and his wife Mary Watson. The pair stayed at the lighthouse until 1923, which is unfortunately when Mary passed away. She had been diagnosed with depression and melancholia, and she had actually begun to undergo treatment for these illnesses and was said to have been in high spirits. But Mary was unfortunately found deceased at the bottom of Beard's Hollow from an apparent suicide. And that was in 1923. That's pretty sad. They say that Mary has been actually seen wandering around the halls of the keeper's residence, and items have been misplaced. Like the keys being moved to different places that they weren't there before and stuff like that. They've actually also said that there have been power surges throughout the area that they attribute to Mary. So, this lighthouse was actually featured in 2019 on Ghost Adventures with Zach Baggins and his team. And I've watched that episode and it's actually pretty interesting. Sometimes that show can be a little bit hinky, I guess you can say. Sometimes it gets really weird and kind of silly, but I did like this one. This was a really good episode. in my opinion, it was a pretty good episode. So a little bit about the lighthouse and the area is, like it's one of the windiest places on the coast. The winds can reach up to 120 miles an hour. And they do say that these winds might have been the cause of Mary Watson's melancholia and depression. And, like that's one of the stories is that, she couldn't take the howling winds any longer and unfortunately stopped that by jumping off of the cliffs above Beard's Hollow. The winds also were the cause of a duck being blown off course, and the winds caused the duck to crash through a window and clip the lens, and this happened in 1932. And so that's pretty interesting. The sandbar itself, right where what the lighthouse is trying to protect is, keep people from getting up, has had many, many wrecks. I'm not going to go into all of them right now, but I will talk a little bit about one in particular. And in 1853, 3 ships actually sank on the sandbar, and one of those ships was the Vandalia, and it sank January 9th, 1853. And unfortunately, all 12 crew members were lost at sea, and only 4 were recovered. And they were recovered because their deceased bodies washed ashore. This also included the namesake of Beard's Hollow, Captain E.N. Beard. 3 of his crew members were found in what is now known as Dead Man's Cove. So there, I wouldn't be surprised if these were a couple other ghosts that could be, heard from around that area. There's also, that whole area has been home to various different indigenous nations for millennia, since time immemorial. So they do say, and there are, speculation that some of the spirits that can be seen and heard on the wind around this area are that of indigenous people who lost their lives on that sandbar and in those waters. And that's pretty important to understand too, is to remember, I think I spoke about it in, the University Heights and Lake Chelan, episodes, is these areas have been populated far longer than, colonizing and colonists have been here. And it's not above reason to think that many of the spirits that we see or hear could possibly belong to those people who've gone before us. So it's just be aware of that and be respectful. Both of these places, both of these lighthouses, Heceta and North Head, are both open for tours. I think it would definitely be worth a visit to both of them. North Head is in Washington, so that'll be a lot easier for me to see, but I think that the area is absolutely just beautiful. I probably wouldn't stay at, like I said, I wouldn't stay at the Airbnbs. I don't particularly care for Airbnbs, but I would absolutely 100% take a tour. I think it would be absolutely marvelous to be able to do something like that. I do want to say, and I want to remind listeners that if you do go to places like this and you do some kind of, investigation or anything like that when it comes to the paranormal, be respectful and be mindful that these are places where, these are people who were alive at one point and they're human beings, even though, they're not tangible like we are. And just be respectful. Don't be rude. Don't, don't stir things up that you don't have to deal with because you don't live there forever. You're not a resident there. Just be mindful, treat them how you would want to be treated, I guess, just be respectful. So that concludes our Lighthouse episode. I am actually probably more than likely going to do a much deeper dive into Lighthouse or North Head and Cape Disappointment, the lighthouses, just because that area is, like I said, it's called the graveyard of the Pacific. There have been, like hundreds of ships that have crashed, and I would love to take a deeper dive into, which ships had, which ships they were, the probability of the spirits there, like more. I want to dive a little bit more into Mary Watson and Alexander Pesson, her husband, and the fact that this lighthouse keeper had an assistant lighthouse keeper who was a woman named Mabel Betherton, and she actually ended up being one of the few women named as lighthouse keeper, and until she resigned in 1907. And I would love to go a little bit deeper into these, the wrecks and the people who took care of these lighthouses and stuff like that, and in North Head in particular. I do recommend watching the episode on from Ghost Adventures. I can't remember what episode it was, but it was aired in the 2019 season. Like I said, it's kind of a campy show. That can be pretty annoying and obnoxious, but it was a pretty decent episode, I think. I do want to remind everybody that I have an Instagram, and you can find us at Spooky PNW Podcast on Instagram. I also would love to have you send in your spooky tales. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to be from Pacific Northwest. They can be from all over. I would love to feature them on my podcast once or twice a month. And you can email those to me at spookypnwpod@gmail.com, or if you're feeling froggy, you can send me a DM on Insta. I also am in the process of getting a Patreon into the works. It's published and all that kind of stuff. There's not a whole lot of things on there. There's a couple desktop, a couple digital things, and I am going to start featuring Patreon specific episodes and deeper dives there. So the deeper dive for North Head might end up being on the Patreon. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. By no means do you have to sign up for it, whatever. It's your choice, but it'll be there, and I'll link it in the show notes. As always, I will link all of the source material that I have for these two lighthouses in the show notes. And I think that's it. But yeah, thanks for joining me. Sorry if this particular episode was a little choppy and kind of all over the place. My notes were kind of just randomly written. I don't even know what I was doing. But you can find us on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Like I said, gonna have a new Patreon going. Have an Insta. You can find me at Spooky PNW Podcast on Instagram. Please write me your spooky stories. I would love to be able to feature them on the podcast. SpookyPNWPod@gmail.com. Thank you, and enjoy your stay, I guess. Before I go, I just wanted to let you know what our next episode is going to feature, and that is going to be a cryptid creature. I'm not quite sure what cryptid creature is going to be, but it is going to be a cryptid creature from either Washington, Idaho, or Oregon. Probably closer to the end of the month is when I will branch out and possibly do something from the Yukon or the Alaska area. Anyway, so enjoy your evening, and I hope you keep it spooky.